It was 2 a.m. when the neighborhood's security system crashed, plunging our quiet suburban enclave into chaos. I woke to the insistent chirping of my backup alert system, a sound I hadn't heard in years. Groggy, I stumbled to my home office, where the server bank hummed ominously. The screens were black, the data feeds flatlined. My heart sank as I checked the diagnostics. Solar input 0. Living in Oak Ridge Estates, a tidy community of manicured lawns and cookie-cutter colonials just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, I'd grown used to the hum of routine. Our neighborhood was safe, or so we thought, thanks to a solar-powered security grid I designed 5 years ago after a spate of break-ins. Cameras, motion lights, encrypted footage storage all ran through my rooftop panels, a fact known only to a select few on the Homeowners Association board. But that night, something had gone catastrophically wrong. I pulled up the roof camera footage, expecting maybe a fried circuit or a bird's nest shorting the system. What I saw made my blood run cold. Every solar panel was coated in a thick, glossy layer of beige latex paint, the kind you'd see on a model home's trim. The timestamp read just after midnight, and the footage captured the culprit in all her glory. Linda Harper, our HOA president, wielding a paint roller like a scepter. She wore leopard print leggings, a visor straight out of a 90s tennis club, and sunglasses at night. Humming what sounded like a Broadway show tune, she slathered my panels with methodical precision, oblivious to the havoc she was unleashing. By morning, the neighborhood was in disarray. Garage doors refused to open, motion lights flickered uselessly, and the main security feed was dead. My phone buzzed with texts from neighbors. My alarm won't reset. The gate's stuck open. My sprinklers won't stop. Meanwhile, Linda was posting selfies on the community's Facebook page, beaming in front of my defaced roof with captions like, "Enhancing Oak Ridge's charm," and HOA heroes. She genuinely believed she'd save the neighborhood from some aesthetic apocalypse. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was caught between disbelief and a strange amusement at the absurdity of it all. Linda had always been a stickler for rules, the kind of person who'd measure your grass with a ruler and fine you for a mailbox that wasn't regulation taupe. But this was vandalism on a scale I couldn't fathom. Those panels weren't just powering my air conditioning or my water heater. They were the backbone of Oak Ridge's security, a system I'd built on a shoestring budget as a favor to the community after thieves hit half a dozen homes in 2020. The HOA had approved it quietly, keeping the panel's location secret to avoid tampering. Apparently, Linda hadn't gotten the memo. I marched to her house, a pristine two-story with rose bushes so perfect they looked plastic. She answered the door in a floral robe, her smile as bright as the morning sun. Before I could speak, she raised a finger like she was about to conduct a symphony. "Tom, I'm glad you're here," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I've been meaning to talk to you about those panels. They're an eyesore, clashing with our approved color palette. I took the liberty of neutralizing them to boost property values." I stared dumbfounded. "Linda," I said, keeping my voice steady, "those panels power the entire security grid. Cameras, lights, gates, everything." Her smile flickered, but she recovered with a laugh. "Oh, Tom, don't be dramatic. They're just your little solar toys. The neighborhood's fine." I pulled out my phone and played the footage, her climbing the ladder, paint roller in hand, muttering about visual harmony. Her face went pale, but she didn't miss a beat. "The HOA never approved any grid like that," she snapped. "If it exists, it's illegal. You'd need public documentation." "I have the contract," I said, "signed by the old board, buried in my files." She smirked. "Good luck finding it." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about aesthetics. Linda knew something. She hadn't painted the panels to make the neighborhood prettier, she'd done it to kill the system. But why? What was she hiding? As I turned to leave, neighbors started gathering on my lawn. Mike from 2 doors down was furious. His daughter's bedroom camera had gone offline. Mrs. Rivera said her garage door nearly crushed her car. The murmurs grew louder, angrier. Linda stood on her porch, arms crossed, still trying to play the hero. I didn't have the energy to argue. "HOA meeting, 6 p.m., I called out. "I'll bring proof." Then I headed to my basement, where I kept a fireproof cabinet of old HOA records. I was sure I'd find the contract, the one that authorized the grid and outlined my role as its caretaker. But when I opened the cabinet, the folder was gone. In its place was a typed letter, and signed, claiming the solar initiative had been canceled years ago and was no longer under HOA protection. The hair on my neck stood up. This wasn't an accident. Someone had been in my house, tampered with my files, and left this fake letter to cover their tracks. Linda wasn't just a meddling busybody, she was playing a deeper game, and I was going to find out what. I spent the afternoon digging through my encrypted backup drive, a habit from my paranoid days as a systems engineer. Sure enough, I found it. A scanned copy of the original contract, time-stamped and signed by every board member from 2020. It detailed the grid's purpose, my authorization, and the HOA's promise to fund maintenance. Those payments had stopped when Linda took over, a fact I'd brushed off as bureaucratic oversight. Now it felt like a clue. The more I read, the clearer it became. Linda hadn't stumbled into this. She'd waited, biding her time as old board members retired or moved away. She'd volunteered for the finance committee, then clawed her way to HOA president. I remembered how Ellen, the former treasurer, had left suddenly, citing personal reasons. Her departure coincided with stricter rules, higher fines, and those missing payments. Now, I wondered if Ellen had been pushed out. I pulled up an old email from her, sent late at night just before she left. Tom, if things go dark, trust your system. Don't let them rewrite the truth. You'll know what to do. At the time, I'd thought it was just stress talking. Now, it felt like a warning. I needed a witness, someone from the old board who could back me up. I remembered Carl, the former vice president, who'd quit after a public spat with Linda over a landscaping bill. I found his number and called. He didn't answer the first time, but on the second try, he picked up, his voice low and wary. Tom, what's this about? I told him about the panels, the paint, the missing contract. He cursed under his breath. Not surprised, he said. Linda's been gunning for control since day one. She thought the cameras made the place look like a prison. Said they projected fear. She's not just after aesthetics, I said. She's hiding something. Carl agreed to meet before the HOA meeting and bring his own files. I thanked him and got to work. I printed the contract, backed it up on multiple drives, and uploaded key points to a secure cloud. Then I posted in the neighborhood group chat. Tonight's HOA meeting will reveal fraud and sabotage. Come if you care about your home's safety. No drama, just facts. The message spread like wildfire. By afternoon, neighbors were at my door. Mr. Lopez, whose garage door had glitched, looked exhausted. His teenage son, red-eyed, said their car had been broken into when the alarm failed. I explained the panels, the sabotage, the missing contract. Lopez shook his head. She betrayed us all. I gave him a copy of the documents and asked him to keep them safe. I did the same with Mike and a few others. By evening, half a dozen homes held pieces of the truth. Linda couldn't silence us all. The community center was packed that night, folding chairs dragged out to accommodate the crowd. Linda strutted in late, clutching a binder and wearing a blazer that screamed authority. She launched into a slideshow of beautification updates, culminating in a photo of my beige-painted roof. She beamed, calling it a step toward neighborhood harmony. I waited, letting her dig her own grave. When she opened the floor, I stood, plugged in my drive, and played the footage. The room fell silent as Linda's roller strokes and self-satisfied humming filled the air. Then I projected the contract, highlighting the signatures and dates. Linda tried to interrupt, claiming it was fake, but Carl walked in, carrying a box of old HOA records. He passed them around, and the murmurs grew. Linda's face went from red to white. A retired judge, Mr. Coleman, stood and called for a vote of inquiry. The room erupted in agreement. Linda tried to shout them down, but she was already losing. By the end of the night, she was no longer in charge. But her cold, calculating stare as she left told me this was far from over. The victory at the HOA meeting felt like a mirage, shimmering but not quite real. Linda Harper had been ousted as president, her authority stripped in front of a room full of neighbors who'd finally seen her for what she was. But as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of my Oak Ridge Estates home, her parting stare haunted me. It wasn't the look of defeat. It was the cold, calculated gaze of someone who'd only lost a skirmish, not the war. Linda wasn't done, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just painted a target on my back. By morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with whispers. People stopped me at the mailbox, asking about the painted panels and the security grid. Some thanked me. Others looked at me with a mix of gratitude and suspicion, as if I'd been hiding the system's existence for my own gain. I couldn't blame them. Trust was a fragile thing in Oak Ridge, and Linda had spent years chipping away at it with her fines, her rules, and her fake smiles. I turned my attention to the security system. The main solar array was dead, coated in beige paint that would take weeks to remove and replace. The backup grid, running on an off-site battery, was keeping emergency zones online gate sensors, a few streetlights, but it wasn't enough. I'd built redundancy into the system, but not for deliberate sabotage. Still, I had one ace up my sleeve, a secret I'd never shared, not even with the old HOA board. Tucked behind an attic vent on my roof was a hidden camera, a tiny node disguised as part of the house's exterior. It didn't power anything. It just watched, recording to a standalone drive. I'd installed it as a last resort, a black box for emergencies. If Linda had been up to more than just painting my panels, this camera might have caught it. I accessed the feed from my office, rewinding past the moment Linda defaced the panels. The footage from the hours before stopped me cold. At 10 p.m., Linda was pacing between her car and a storage shed near the HOA office, a squat metal building we all thought held holiday decorations and folding tables. She was hauling boxes, big ones, heavy ones, at least a dozen. She struggled with a dolly, her face strained under the weight. These weren't wreaths or plastic Santas. I zoomed in on one box as she turned it. A small black logo caught my eye. A barcode and the initials VSD, Vanguard Security Technologies, the same vendor I'd worked with to build Oak Ridge's system 5 years ago. My stomach twisted. There was no reason for Linda to have that equipment unless she was planning something big. Not just vandalism, but a takeover. She wanted her own security system, one she could control, one that answered only to her. I dug into my files and found the vendor records. The HOA hadn't placed an order with VSD in years, but a bulk purchase had gone through 2 months ago, billed to a name I didn't recognize. Oak Ridge Community Enhancement LLC. The delivery address was our community center. Linda had been planning this for months, maybe longer, and she'd done it right under our noses. I needed to see inside that shed, but the HOA office was locked tight, and after last night's meeting, Linda would be on high alert. Breaking in alone was too risky. She might have cameras of her own. I needed someone with skills and a low profile. That's when I called Jake, an old college buddy who'd gone from IT nerd to cybersecurity contractor with a sideline in what he called creative access solutions. He owed me a favor from years back, and I knew he'd jump at the chance to outsmart a suburban tyrant like Linda. "Does this involve that HOA which you mentioned?" Jake asked when I called. "Front and center," I said. He laughed. "Give me an hour." We met at dusk, parking a block away from the community center. Jake carried a tablet and a small black case that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. "First, we blind her," he said, tapping into the community Wi-Fi. Within minutes, he'd looped the office's front-facing cameras with footage from the previous night, giving us a 20-minute window. The shed's digital padlock had a thumbprint scanner, but Jake was ready. He pressed a handheld device to the reader, ran a script, and the lock clicked open in seconds. Inside, the shed was a tech hoarder's dream. Racks of uninstalled cameras, signal boosters, and a hardwired server hub filled the space. This wasn't a backup plan, it was a fully operational surveillance network, built in secret. Jake whistled low. "She's not playing around." He scanned the server and found it was already active, storing test footage. "This thing's been running," he said, pulling up the most recent clip. My breath caught as the screen showed a backyard, not mine, not Jake's, but the Wilsons' backyard, where their 10-year-old daughter, Emily, was playing by the pool. The camera angle was high, invasive, peering into their windows. The timestamp was 3 days old, and the folder held dozens of similar clips, all from private homes. Jake's voice was tight. "This is an HOA business, Tom. This is illegal." We wore gloves, took photos, and cataloged everything without touching a thing. Jake downloaded the server's drive, his face grim. "She's been spying on people, recording without consent. If this gets out, she's done." We locked the shed and slipped away, but the weight of what we'd found clung to me. Linda hadn't just painted my panels to kill my system, she was building her own, one that violated every resident's privacy. She wasn't just after control, she was after power, the kind that came with secrets and leverage. Back home, I compiled a report, video stills, timestamps, inventory lists, and the VSD purchase order tied to the HOA's address. I didn't send it to the board, they were too shell-shocked from the meeting. Instead, I sent it anonymously to the Mecklenburg County Compliance Office and the District Attorney's Office. But I wasn't done. I wanted Linda to face the neighbors she'd betrayed, not just a courtroom. I prepared a second version of the report for the community, one I'd present myself. The next morning, I got a call from Officer Daniels, a county compliance officer who'd traced the footage to my original system design. "Mr. Bennett, we received your package," he said. "Can you give a statement in person?" "Absolutely," I said. As we were about to hang up, he added, "You're not the first to complain about Miss Harper, but you're the first with hard evidence." My pulse quickened. Linda had been under investigation for months. This wasn't just about Oak Ridge had a history, and I'd just handed the authorities the key to her downfall. But that also meant she'd be desperate, cornered, and dangerous. If she'd gone this far spying, sabotaging, stealing, she wouldn't stop now. The neighborhood felt different that day, the air thick with tension. Linda hadn't been seen on her usual rounds. No clipboard, no inspections. That wasn't a good sign. A quiet Linda was a plotting Linda. Then I noticed the flyers, pinned to every gate and mailbox. Cheap, photocopied sheets accusing me of hacking the HOA system, misusing data, and spying on residents for profit. The words were vague but vicious, designed to sow doubt. No signature, but Linda's fingerprints were all over it. Some neighbors bought it. I saw it in their eyes, the hesitation, the sideways glances. Fear spreads faster than truth, and Linda was banking on that. She'd flipped the narrative, painting herself as the victim and me as the villain. I had proof, but she had panic, and panic was winning. I called an emergency community meeting for that night. No HOA approval needed. I printed every piece of evidence, shed photos, footage stills, the VSD order, system logs. Jake recorded a video statement confirming the equipment's existence, framing it like a deposition to avoid legal trouble. I wasn't waiting for the county's slow wheels to turn. This had to be public, now. By 7 p.m., the community center was packed, standing room only. Retirees, young families, even teenagers showed up, drawn by the rumors. Linda was there, front and center, her face a mask of calm, hands folded like she was at a church service. I started with a confession, not an accusation. I explained the solar grid, its approval 5 years ago, how it had protected Oak Ridge until Linda's sabotage. I showed the contract, the signatures, the payment records. Then I dropped the bomb. The shed, the secret cameras, the footage of private homes. I played a clip, not the Wilson girls, but one of a neighbor's driveway, enough to make the point. The room went silent, then erupted in gasps. Linda didn't flinch, but I saw her throat tighten. She stood, asking to speak. "This isn't a trial," I said. "We're just neighbors here." But she stepped forward anyway, her voice smooth as silk. She claimed she'd only wanted to modernize the system, that my grid was outdated, that her cameras were a temporary fix for security gaps. She said she hadn't known they were recording private areas, that she'd planned to inform the board. It was a masterful lie, emotional and vague. But the neighbors weren't buying it. A mom asked why it was all done in secret. A veteran demanded to know why the board was kept in the dark. Then a teenager, the Wilson boy, stood and asked, "Why was a camera pointed at my sister's bedroom?" The room froze. Linda's smile cracked. She opened her mouth, but no one was listening. The tide had turned, and she knew it. The community center was a pressure cooker that night, the air thick with outrage and disbelief. Linda Harper stood at the front, her carefully crafted facade crumbling as a teenager's question, "Why was a camera pointed at my sister's bedroom?" hung unanswered. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the creak of folding chairs as neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Linda's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, she looked small, cornered, her authority reduced to a flicker. Someone called for a vote, not an official one, just a show of hands. Do we trust Linda to stay as HOA president? Not a single hand rose. Another question, should we request county oversight? Every hand shot up, a forest of resolve. Linda didn't wait for the fallout. She turned, her blazer swishing, and walked out without a word. No one stopped her. No one met her eyes. But I knew this wasn't the end. Linda didn't surrender, she regrouped. Outside, as the crowd dispersed into the cool North Carolina night, Carl, The former HOA vice president clapped me on the shoulder. "Haven't seen Oak Ridge this united in years, Tom," he said, his voice gruff but warm. I nodded, but unease gnawed at me. Linda's silence wasn't defeat, it was strategy. She'd lost the room, but she still had access to whatever she'd built in that shed, and I was certain there was more to her plan than we'd uncovered. Back home, I couldn't sleep. The victory felt hollow, like I'd won a battle but missed the war. I reviewed the security architecture again, mapping out what needed fixing. The solar panels were still coated in beige paint, useless until I could replace them. The backup battery was holding, but it couldn't sustain the full grid. I needed to act fast, but first, I had to know what Linda was hiding. The shed was a start, but it felt like a distraction, a piece of a larger puzzle. Then I remembered my hidden camera, the one disguised as an attic vent. I hadn't checked its full feed yet, too focused on the painting incident. I pulled up the footage, scrubbing through the hours before Linda's ladder stunt. Most of it was mundane cars passing, dogs barking, but one clip, timestamped 9 p.m. the night before, caught my attention. Linda wasn't alone. A man, face obscured by a hoodie, met her near the shed. They spoke briefly, heads close, before he handed her a small black case. She tucked it into her car and drove off. The exchange lasted less than a minute, but it screamed conspiracy. Who was he? A vendor? A partner? I couldn't tell, but the case looked like it held tech, maybe a drive, maybe a device. Whatever it was, Linda hadn't wanted it on camera. My gut told me this was the real reason she'd painted the panels, not just to kill my system, but to blind it before something bigger went down. The next morning, Oak Ridge was a different place. Neighbors whispered in driveways, glancing at Linda's house like it was a haunted mansion. She hadn't emerged, no morning walks, no clipboard patrols. That worried me more than her usual meddling. A quiet Linda was a dangerous Linda, plotting in the shadows. Then I saw the flyers, pinned to every lamppost and gate. Smear sheets accusing me of hacking the HOA system, spying on residents, and profiting from their data. The language was sly, avoiding direct lies, but dripping with innuendo. No signature, but it was Linda's work, her last-ditch effort to flip the narrative. Some neighbors believed it. I saw it in the way Mrs. Carter avoided my eyes at the mailbox, or how Mr. Nguyen hesitated before waving. Fear was Linda's weapon, and she wielded it well. If she could make people doubt me, she could slip away unscathed. I wasn't going to let that happen. I spent the day preparing for a second community meeting, this one unsanctioned by the HOA. I printed more evidence, shed photos, server logs, the VSD purchase order. Jake, my cybersecurity friend, sent me a video statement confirming the secret camera's existence, worded carefully to hold up in court. I wasn't waiting for the county to act. Justice needed to be public, immediate, and undeniable. But that afternoon, everything changed. I was in my office, sorting files, when an anonymous email hit my inbox. No subject, no text, just an attachment, a screenshot from inside my house. Not from my cameras, not from my system. The angle was high, tucked behind a bookshelf, aimed at my desk where I sat now. The timestamp was from 3 days ago, before the HOA meeting, before I'd exposed Linda's shed. My blood ran cold. Linda hadn't just been watching the neighbor who'd been watching me. I tore through the room, checking every corner. Behind the bookshelf's molding, I found it. A tiny wireless camera, no bigger than a paperclip, battery-powered and perfectly positioned. It wasn't part of my grid. Someone, Linda or her mystery accomplice, had planted it in my home. This wasn't vandalism or power games anymore. This was personal, a violation that crossed every line. I called Officer Daniels from the county compliance office, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside. "I need you here now," I said, not mentioning the camera over the phone. I didn't know who might be listening. Daniels arrived within the hour, his face shifting from professional calm to grim focus as I showed him the email, the screenshot, and the camera itself. "This changes things," he said, making 2 calls. One to a judge, another to the county's cybercrimes unit. Within 48 hours, a warrant was issued to seize the HOA office, Linda's laptop, and the shed's digital infrastructure. Linda tried to fight it, claiming it was a setup, accusing me of framing her out of male jealousy. But the camera in my house was the nail in her coffin. No HOA rule could justify planting surveillance in a resident's private home. The police searched her house and found more than I'd expected: blueprints for hidden cameras across Oak Ridge, drafts of scripts for future HOA meetings to smear neighbors, and folders labeled by address. Mine was marked Trouble Engineer. Another, chillingly, was called Election Insurance, detailing a plan to rig HOA votes by threatening code violations and offering waivers for loyalty. Linda had built a shadow government, not just watching but manipulating, blackmailing, and profiting. She'd invested in a third-party security firm, funneling HOA funds to it through her fake LLC. It was corruption on a scale nobody saw coming from a woman whose biggest claim to fame was her 2019 Best Lawn plaque. The county moved fast. By week's end, Linda faced charges, illegal surveillance, fraud, harassment, and misuse of HOA funds. But the damage lingered. Neighbors drew their curtains tighter, locked their doors earlier. Trust, already fragile, was in tatters. I couldn't blame them knowing someone had watched their kids, their lives, left a scar. Still, something remarkable began to take root. The community didn't just crumble, it started to rebuild. Carl stepped up as interim HOA president, and Ellen, the former treasurer, returned from Florida after hearing about Linda's downfall. She confided that Linda had threatened to accuse her of embezzlement, a lie that drove her away. "I should have fought," Ellen said, her eyes wet. "But you did, Tom. Thank you." We began restoring the security grid, but this time, it wasn't just on me. For neighbors volunteered their rooftops for new panels, distributing the load. No more secrets, no more single points of failure. We formed a rotating oversight committee, open to any resident for a 3-month term to review HOA budgets and security protocols. It wasn't perfect, but it was transparent, and that made all the difference. The Wilsons, whose daughter's backyard had been filmed, surprised everyone. They proposed funding a legal action group to educate HOAs statewide about surveillance laws and resident rights. "This can't happen again," Mrs. Wilson said at a planning meeting, her voice fierce. "Not here, not anywhere." I declined a board seat, despite offers. "I'm better in the background," I told Carl, half smiling. Keeping watch, not running the show. But as I stood on my roof that evening, watching workers install new panels, black, gleaming, untouched by beige, I felt a flicker of peace. Oak Ridge was breathing again, its pulse steady. Then, 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived, no return address. Inside was a flash drive and a note in messy handwriting I recognized as Linda's. It read, "You won this time, but I wasn't alone." My stomach churned as I plugged in the drive. It held a spreadsheet, names, emails, phone numbers, HOA leaders across Charlotte, maybe beyond. One tab, labeled Mutual Interests, listed vendor contracts, shared logins, and security firms. Linda hadn't just been a rogue operator. She was part of a network, a web of control stretching far beyond Oak Ridge. I stared at the screen, the weight of it sinking in. This wasn't over. Not yet. The flash drive sat on my desk like a ticking bomb, its contents burning a hole in my thoughts. Linda Harper's note, "You won this time," but I wasn't alone, wasn't just a taunt. It was a warning. The spreadsheet I'd found listed names, emails, and phone numbers of HOA leaders across Charlotte, maybe further, tied to vendor contracts and security firms. Oak Ridge Estates wasn't Linda's only playground. She was part of something bigger, a network of control woven through suburban communities like ours. As I stared at the screen in my home office, the quiet of my North Carolina neighborhood felt deceptive, like the calm before a hurricane. I didn't touch the drive again that night. Instead, I locked it in my fireproof safe and called Officer Daniels at the Mecklenburg County Compliance Office. "I've got something new," I said, keeping my voice low, though I was alone. "It's big. Send it over securely," Daniels said, his tone sharp. "And don't talk about it on open lines." His caution confirmed my fears. Linda's network wasn't a small-time scheme. I uploaded the spreadsheet to a secure cloud link Daniels provided, then made physical copies on 2 encrypted drives, stashing one in a safe deposit box at my bank. I wasn't taking chances. If Linda had accomplices, they might already be watching. The next morning, Oak Ridge was a mix of relief and paranoia. The new solar panels gleamed on 4 rooftops, and the security grid was back online, stronger than before. Neighbors waved as they walked their dogs, but their smiles were tight, their eyes darting to Linda's house, now dark and silent. She hadn't been seen since her charges were filed: illegal surveillance, fraud, harassment, and misuse of HOA funds. Rumor was she'd posted bail and was lying low, but I knew better. Linda wasn't hiding. She was planning. I met Carl, the interim HOA president, at the community center to discuss next steps. Ellen, the former treasurer who'd returned from Florida, joined us, her face lined with determination. I should have seen it, she said, clutching a coffee mug. Linda pushed me out with lies about embezzlement. I ran because I was scared. But you stopped her. Not yet, I said, glancing at the door. She wasn't working alone. I told them about the flash drive, keeping details vague. Carl's jaw tightened. A network? You mean other HOAs are doing this? Maybe, I said. Or worse. Ellen leaned forward. When I was treasurer, Linda kept pushing for contracts with this one security firm, Vanguard Security Technologies. I thought it was just her being picky, but now, that's the same vendor, I said, my pulse quickening. Their equipment was in her shed. We agreed to keep it quiet until the county investigated, but I needed more than their word. I called Jake, my cybersecurity friend, and asked him to dig into Vanguard's records. Look for anything tied to that LLC she used, Oak Ridge Community Enhancement, I said, and check if other HOAs are linked. Jake chuckled, but his voice was serious. You're turning me into a suburban detective, Tom. I'll get back to you. While I waited, I noticed a shift in the neighborhood. The flyers Linda had spread, accusing me of spying, were gone, torn down by neighbors who'd seen the truth at the last meeting. But doubt lingered. At the grocery store, Mrs. Carter apologized for avoiding me. I didn't know what to believe, she said. Those flyers, they sounded so real. They were meant to, I said. That's how she worked. Back home, I reviewed the hidden camera footage from my attic vent again, focusing on the man who'd met Linda by the shed. I enhanced the clip, but his face stayed obscured. His build was average, his hoodie generic, but something about his posture confident, almost military, stuck with me. I sent the clip to Jake, asking if he could cross-reference it with any security feeds from nearby businesses. It was a long shot, but I was running out of options. That evening, Jake called back, his voice low. You're not gonna like this, Tom. That LLC? It's a shell company, registered to a P.O. box in Raleigh. But I traced its bank transfers. They lead to Vanguard, and Vanguard's got contracts with at least 6 HOAs in the county, all using the same setup: cameras, servers, the works. And get this, the payments are funneled through a holding company tied to a guy named Richard Voss. Who's Voss? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. Ex-cop, now a private security consultant. He's got a rap sheet: nothing major, just shady deals, unreported income. Word is, he pitches enhanced security to HOAs, then installs systems that double as surveillance for, let's call it, private clients. My mind flashed to the man in the hoodie. Could Voss be the guy Linda met? Maybe, Jake said. I'm working on the footage. Sit tight. Sitting tight wasn't an option. The next day, I got a call from Daniels. Your drive's a goldmine, Bennett, he said. We've linked it to 3 other HOAs with similar complaints: secret cameras, missing funds. Voss's name came up. We're building a case, but we need you to testify. Can you meet tomorrow? Name the time, I said. But trouble was already brewing. That afternoon, a new wave of flyers appeared, this time targeting the entire HOA board. They claimed Carl and Ellen were complicit in Linda's scheme, that the new panels were a scam to siphon dues. The lies were bolder, more desperate, and neighbors were rattled. At a coffee shop, Mike, whose daughter's camera had failed, pulled me aside. People are scared, Tom. They don't know who to trust. Then we show them, I said. Another meeting. Tomorrow night. I spent the day preparing, but the real blow came at midnight. I was checking my email when another anonymous message arrived, this time with a video. It was grainy, but unmistakable. Me, walking through my backyard, time-stamped last week. The angle wasn't from my cameras or Linda's shed. It was from a drone, hovering just beyond my fence. The message read, back off, or everyone sees what you're really hiding. My heart pounded. I had nothing to hide, but the threat was clear: Linda, or her allies, could twist anything to ruin me. I called Jake immediately. They've got drones now, I said, forwarding the video. Can you trace it? On it, he said. But Tom, you're in deep. Watch your back. The next morning, I met Daniels at the county office, handing over the drone video and the new email. His face darkened. This is escalation, he said. Voss has a history of intimidation tactics. We're moving on his office today, but you need to stay low. I nodded, but staying low wasn't my style. I had a neighborhood to protect, and Linda's network was still out there, pulling strings. That night, I called the third community meeting, and the community center was packed again. Teenagers, retirees, families, everyone showed up, their faces a mix of anger and hope. Linda wasn't there, but her absence loomed large. I started with the truth, laying out the shed, the cameras, and the charges against Linda. Then I dropped the bombshell, the flash drive, the network, the other HOAs. This isn't just about Oak Ridge, I said, projecting the spreadsheet's redacted names. Linda was part of something bigger, and we're stopping it. The room erupted in questions. Why hadn't we known? Who else was involved? A woman in the back, Mrs. Wilson, stood, her voice shaking. My daughter's privacy was violated. If this is happening elsewhere, we have to act. Not just for us, for everyone. Carl took the mic, announcing the Oversight Committee and the Legal Action Group funded by the Wilsons. We're not victims, he said. We're fighters. The crowd cheered, but I couldn't shake the drone video. Someone was still watching, and they weren't done. As the meeting ended, Jake texted me. Got a hit on the drone. Registered to a shell company linked to Voss. Meet me tomorrow. We're going hunting. I left the center with a mix of dread and resolve. Linda was down, but her network was alive, and Voss was the key. I wasn't just fighting for Oak Ridge anymore, I was fighting for every community caught in their web. The drone video haunted me, a grainy reminder that Linda Harper's shadow still loomed over Oak Ridge Estates. Her note, "You won this time," but I wasn't alone. In the flash drive spreadsheet had cracked open a conspiracy far bigger than our Charlotte suburb. A network of HOA leaders, tied to Richard Voss and Vanguard Security Technologies, was rigging communities with illegal surveillance and blackmail schemes. As I locked my office door that night, the weight of it settled in. This wasn't just about saving Oak Ridge. It was about dismantling a machine that preyed on trust. Jake's text got a hit on the drone. Meet me tomorrow. We're going hunting, lit a fire under me. I barely slept, my mind racing through the evidence. Linda's shed, the hidden cameras, the spreadsheet, the drone. By morning, I was at Jake's apartment, a cluttered space filled with monitors and coffee mugs. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his eyes bloodshot but sharp. The drone's registered to a shell company, same as the LLC Linda used, he said, pulling up a map. The signal pinged from a warehouse in Huntersville, 20 minutes north. Voss owns it through a proxy. I hacked their security feed cameras, servers, the works. It's active, Tom. They're still running ops. My stomach tightened. What kind of ops? Jake hesitated, then showed me a clip from the warehouse feed. Men in dark jackets moved crates labeled with Vanguard's logo, stacking them beside racks of servers. One crate was open, revealing cameras identical to the ones in Linda's shed. This isn't just HOAs, Jake said. They're selling surveillance data, home footage, personal Rudinesto third parties. Could be advertisers, could be worse. I thought of the Wilson girl, filmed in her backyard, and my blood boiled. We need to shut it down. Jake nodded. I've got a plan, but it's not exactly legal. You in? I didn't hesitate. All the way. We met Officer Daniels that afternoon at a diner off I-77, away from prying eyes. I handed him a drive with Jake's findings, the warehouse, the drone, and the spreadsheet's links to other HOAs. Daniels' face hardened. Voss is slippery, he said. We've been after him for years, but he's got friends in high places. This could crack it, but we need airtight evidence. Can you get me inside that warehouse? Jake smirked. Already working on it. That night, under cover of darkness, Jake and I drove to Huntersville. He'd looped the warehouse's external cameras, giving us a 15-minute window. The building was a nondescript metal box, surrounded by a chain-link fence. Jake disabled the gate's digital lock with a handheld scanner, and we slipped inside, moving like ghosts. The air smelled of oil and electronics, the hum of servers filling the space. We found the crates, just like in the feed, and a server room pulsing with data. Jake plugged in a device to download the drives, his fingers flying. This is it, he whispered. Names, addresses, footage from dozens of neighborhoods. They've got dirt on everyone, residents, board members, even cops. My heart raced. This was bigger than I'd imagined, a digital empire built on betrayal. But as Jake's device beeped, a shadow moved in the corner. I froze. A man stepped into the light, tall, broad, with the same confident posture I'd seen in the hoodie by Linda's shed. "Boss, you shouldn't be here," he said, his voice calm but edged with menace. He held a flashlight, but I saw the bulge of a holster under his jacket. I raised my hands, stalling. "We know everything, Voss. The cameras, the data, the HOAs. It's over." He laughed, low and cold. "You think Linda was the brains? She was a pawn, Bennett. A useful idiot. You take me down, Tim will pop up. People pay for control." Jake, still at the server, didn't look up, but I saw his hand slip to his pocket. I kept talking, drawing Voss's attention. "The county's got your name. The DA's got the drive. You're done." Voss's eyes narrowed, his hand twitching toward his gun. But before he could move, Jake triggered a remote EMP device, a prototype he'd bragged about. The servers sparked and died, the lights flickering. Voss lunged, but I tackled him, pinning him against a crate. Jake zip-tied his wrists, his face grim. "You're lucky we're not cops," he said. We dragged Voss to the van, called Daniels, and waited. Within an hour, county deputies swarmed the warehouse, seizing crates and drives. Voss didn't talk, but he didn't need to. Evidence spoke for itself. By dawn, the operation was dismantled, and Voss was in custody, facing charges that would keep him locked up for decades. Back in Oak Ridge, the fallout was swift. Daniels called to confirm the spreadsheet had led to raids on 3 other HOA-linked operations across North Carolina. Linda, already charged, turned state's evidence to reduce her sentence, spilling names and deals. She'd been recruited by Voss 2 years ago, lured by promises of power and profit. Her beige paint job was a clumsy attempt to blind my system before Voss's team installed their own. The neighborhood held a final meeting, not in the community center, but in the park, under open sky. Carl and Ellen outlined the new HOA, transparent budgets, open elections, and a permanent ban on private surveillance. The Wilsons' legal action group was already drafting state legislation to regulate HOAs, with Oak Ridge as the model. Neighbors stood to speak, not just about Linda but about trust, about how they'd let her rule too long. Mrs. Wilson, tears in her eyes, thanked me. "You gave us our home back," she said. I shook my head. "We did it together." That night, I stood on my roof, the new panels gleaming under the stars. Oak Ridge was safe, not because of cameras or contracts, but because its people had woken up. They'd seen what silence bred tyranny in a blazer, corruption behind a smile, and they'd said no more. The story could have ended there, but one last piece fell into place. A week later, Jake sent me a file, the cleaned-up footage from my attic camera, showing Voss meeting Linda. It was the final nail, ensuring neither would walk free. I archived it, then deleted the anonymous emails, the drone video, the fear. I was done looking over my shoulder. Oak Ridge wasn't perfect. Neighbors still bickered over fence heights or noisy lawnmowers, but they talked now, openly, without fear. The oversight committee met monthly, and the security grid hummed quietly, its data public and its purpose clear. I stayed in the background, tweaking systems, watching not as a spy, but as a guardian. As I write this, I'm struck by how close we came to losing everything, not just cameras, but trust, safety, home. Linda and Voss weren't monsters. They were opportunists, exploiting our apathy. But we fought back, not with fists but with truth, and that's a victory no one can paint over. I want to hear from you. In the comments below, share your thoughts. Have you faced injustice in your community? How do you stand against power abused in plain sight? What would you have done in Oak Ridge? Your voice matters. Let's keep this conversation alive.